Welcome to this Africa program event on deep technology in Africa. My name is Ahmed Soliman and I'm a research fellow with the Africa program at Chatham House. I'd like to welcome our speakers today for this panel, Dr. Riam Kanso, the CEO of Conceptionx, Nekesa Were, the Interim Executive Director of AfriLabs, and Malik Bedri, partner with Diaspora Ventures. I'd also like to welcome our audience, those participating through Zoom, which currently have 160 plus, and those joining us via Facebook Live. As I said, this meeting will be a look at deep technology in Africa. Our speakers are going to discuss this subject, including the support that startups require, the investment landscape, as well as the potential of the innovation to sustainably grow inclusive economies, improve development outcomes, and protect against issues like climate change and health risks. Before we get started, I have some housekeeping for you all. So all of the attendees are going to be muted during the presentations, but you will be able to use the raise hand function in the banner of your screen during the Q&A in order to ask questions live, and we very much like for you to do so. If selected, the Africa program team will grant you the ability to unmute yourself and ask your question. Apologies in advance if you're not able to do this today. We have approaching 200 people participating in the event today, so it might not be possible. Zoom participants can also submit some written questions through the Q&A box throughout the meeting. But again, it's our preference for you to use the raise hand function during the Q&A session so that you can ask your questions directly. Unfortunately, we're not able to take questions from participants joining us from Facebook Live at this time, so do accept our apologies for this. As a reminder to you all, this meeting is on the record, and those attending the meeting can use the information from it and identify the speakers or any other participants. Filming and recording of this event is not allowed without prior permission from Chatham House. However, you are in the audience all very welcome to use Twitter and tweet the event using our hashtag #CHAfrica. So I'll read the speakers' biographies and then we can start our first presentation. Dr. Riam Kanso is the CEO of Conceptionx, a position which he took after heading up student entrepreneurship at University College London Engineering since 2017. Riam has a DPhil in neuroscience from Oxford University and has worked at the interface of academia and industry for the best part of 10 years. She has launched 2 companies, worked in medtech and computational science, and taught entrepreneurship at both UCL and Cambridge. Conceptionx is now her full-time mission. It's set up as a not-for-profit with the aim of helping bright students to solve global challenges. Our next speaker is Nekesa Were, the Interim Executive Director of AfriLabs. In this role, she's responsible for building community programs, partnerships that work together to ensure a thriving innovation economy across the 202 innovation hubs in 46 African countries that make up the AfriLabs network. For the last decade, Nekesa has worked at the heart of Africa's technology and innovation ecosystem, most recently as the Managing Director of iHub, Kenya's leading innovation hub. During her leadership at iHub, over 600 startups received business support services, and over 150 of those were selected for incubation and acceleration programs. iHub companies raised over $40 million US in early investments and contributed over 40,000 jobs in East Africa's economy. Lastly but not leastly, we have Malik Bedri, who's a partner at Diaspora Ventures. His core focus for the firm is driving partnership, engagement, and funding strategy. He's an established track record of founding not-for-profit organizations such as the Youth Factor and others, and has created grassroots institutions focused on the development and prosperity of African youth and diaspora communities in London. Alongside forming Diaspora Ventures, Malik oversees financial planning and analysis across Europe at a private equity firm. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to our first speaker, Riam, to give us an insight on deep tech and how Conceptionx is working in this area through academia and industry. Thank you, Riam.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, all right. Hi, everyone. I'm Riam. I'm delighted to be here and happy to see so many people interested in deep tech in Africa. A warm welcome to my fellow panelists, and I think I will just jump right in. So today I just want to give you a little bit of a background on Conceptionx, the vision behind it, and how we can more closely collaborate with Africa in the light of the future economy. So Conceptionx is a venture program and platform that was designed to help PhD students create products and services based on their research in deep technology. Now, what is deep technology? We define it simply as a technology based on original cutting-edge research that is conducted at the university level, and which we now know is forecasted to have a huge impact on sustainably growing the future economy. So, examples could include artificial intelligence, drug development, 3D printing. It's not limited to one area. The point is that for someone to copy your business, they need to have that background knowledge in deep tech. So via these PhD-led startups, we help students solve huge problems in society and the economy, spanning health, energy, agriculture. As a company, we are not-for-profit, hugely led by passion and values, and we are funded by donations from institutions who share our values. The program was created as a collaborative effort by academics and industry leaders from UK and beyond. Although we started as a pilot in University College London in 2018, we now work across the UK and are opening up to work with talented students from across the world. So why is Conceptionx different than other programs? I mean, a lot of the people on this call might be aware of many different institutions and incubators and accelerators doing this. We are unique because we have positioned ourselves actually as an education transformation piece. So we sit alongside the PhD and impact the very nature of how commercialization works. Normally with entrepreneurship programs, they require students to take time off their studies, do some business training, some mentorship, and then decide if they can start a company or not. At Conceptionx, things are very different. We are a deep and intensive platform, and we're underpinned by amazing methodology and research. So we designed a program that runs over 9 months and doesn't require people to take time off their studies. Now, this has significantly de-risked starting a company as a career choice and has invited students to form companies who wouldn't have otherwise thought of it, especially if, for example, they had a job offer at the end of their PhD, where taking that would be significantly less risky than starting off a company themselves. Now, at Conceptionx, everything starts with a mindset change. The first thing we do is that we show smart young people that they're able to take a very different career path than normally a PhD would train them for. They can work for themselves and they can become what we call venture scientists, which is our term for scientific entrepreneurs. This is followed by a diligent training, coaching, and mentorship program that slowly picks up the students who have viable ideas and gets them closer to the market. We have a strong network of mentors, world-class innovators, and industry leaders. So it is kind of this one-to-one attention from the mentors and the industry players that really makes Conceptionx kick off and produce all of the amazing results that we've had. And the last step is also connection to industry players who can act as clients for the companies. So if you can imagine like an innovation assembly line that gives these students what they need in order to form these companies. Now, just to give you a sense of the results so far, we started in 2018 and so far about 100 students have participated in this program, 100 teams, in fact, that can include at least one PhD. So far, our teams have raised about 7 million in pre-seed capital, and generated millions of pounds in revenue, and these results keep coming in. Now, with more PhD students applying to Conceptionx, the quality of this research is increasing, and we really are helping them getting closer to market and improve their commercial readiness. So this leads to faster company development, as you can imagine, and earlier commercial successes. The point is that we're training some really intelligent people for a spectrum of jobs in the economy of the future, and we're doing that by changing what it means to actually do a PhD, to be more impactful and to be more innovative, which is the whole purpose of doing these very deep technology research projects. Now, just to kind of start tying this into this panel, we know that the economic effects of commercializing university research are huge. I'm looking at what is now a slightly older study from MIT in 2014 that stated that alumni-founded companies have created 4.6 million jobs and contribute $2 trillion in revenue to the global economy each year. If you think that now we're in 2020 and how that trickles down to other countries who are commercializing research, the impact is quite huge. And then when we look at the World Economic Forum, we know that creativity, critical thinking, and complex problem solving are the top 3 skills required. All of these things are present in deep tech. And with the economy shrinking due to COVID, I think these innovations should really be pushed forward. For companies to survive in the midst of this current economic crisis, we know that relevance is one of the key things that would help propel them to create solutions for the future. So if I look at what has come through Conceptionx so far and kind of tying it against the African Development Bank high 5 priority areas, we see that a lot of these companies kind of naturally tie themselves to what these challenges are. And I think it's due to the nature that people working on PhD research areas are really trying to solve relevant problems in the world. So if you look at Feed Africa, we have a company called CatchMaps, which provides farmers and landowners with evidence to make data-driven decisions to optimize environmental activity on farms. If we look at Industrialize Africa as another challenge, we have a very brilliant team from Cambridge who are working on a self-healing concrete solution by doing 3D printing to kind of create like a vascular structure in concrete that would help the construction industry. And if we look at improving the quality of life in Africa, in our last cohort, we had a company called In Utero, led by a student of African origin called Isha. Now, she created a data-driven platform to help test drugs of Alzheimer's disease. And having read over the weekend that Africa has the highest concentration of female entrepreneurs in the world, I really hope that students like her could act as a role model to encourage them to start their own companies and use their research for solving huge problems that impact all of us in the world now. Now, in the light of COVID-19, it made us as a company consider everything. Now, with universities transitioning to an online model, what is missing is the kind of interaction and community that is built, and also the mentorship platform that helps some of these students innovate and accelerate what they're bringing to market. We transferred all of the program online, but this has also opened an unprecedented potential for us. We have a structure and we have a data platform that's online. It keeps reinvigorating itself, but also mentors from all over the world can potentially get involved. Previously, we had space as a consideration. So how can we bring people together in the same room? But now with everything happening online, you can imagine how, for example, a student doing a PhD in Nigeria could be connected with a scientific mentor from Cambridge University, and then perhaps with another collaborator based in another African country, and to use these collaborations to bring everything forward. We can also imagine how companies and industry players from around the world can start participating in this program, and also to help escalate these innovations and really start solving what we know are increasing problems in the economy and to basically bring forth the full potential of these students from all over the world. So I think, you know, my section is drawing to a close, but why am I here today? Mostly to discuss how we can work together to make this a global success, to invite collaborations. I am by no means an expert in the deep technology landscape in Africa, but we've already identified quite a few individuals and institutions who this could be relevant to. So I invite and I welcome collaborations from AfriLabs, from Africa Lakes, from the CC Hub, and from any other institutions who are on this call who can help us to make this a success. Mentorship is huge for us. So we have we have 256 participants on this call now. A lot of you can be great mentors for these students. We also invite partnerships, but most of all, I'm really excited to see how this conversation goes forward. And I'm looking forward to hear from the other panelists and talk about deep tech. So thanks very much, Ahmed. I think I'm happy to pass on the slide.
Thank you so much, Rem. Thank you very much for that opening. Really interesting to hear from you on that and the work that you're doing with Conceptionx. Passing over swiftly to Nekesa to give us really some insights on where Africa is now in African countries and what the context is with regards to the innovation ecosystem.
Thank you, Ahmed, and it's indeed a great pleasure to be on this call and in such great company. Certainly a lot can be said about deep tech in Africa, and I felt for this call, I wanted to share 4 key thoughts that I've been pondering about for the last week or so. The first is that deep tech is made for Africa, and Africa is made for deep tech. And what I mean by that is that just by the nature of how African innovators will innovate, it will be that it is primarily for social good and then for profit. And so a lot of the work coming out of the African continent will have images of desire and just the need for those communities to survive and to do so with dignity. So any tool that's going to allow African innovators to do that and to do it sustainably and at scale is definitely one that's going to have a great chance of succeeding in Africa. So deep tech, as I said, is almost by definition going to be dealing with societal challenges and also environmental challenges. And in fact, some research from Boston Consulting Group suggests that a lot of the innovators working in deep tech are solving for UN's social development goals. And so anything around good health and well-being, sustainable cities and communities, industry innovation and infrastructure. Deep tech startups are also solving, interestingly, for Africa Union's Agenda 2063, which is primarily to make Africa a global powerhouse of the future. And so again, you find deep tech in the African context is focused on inclusive and sustainable economies and standards of living. So there's DroneSeek in Angola, for example, that's using drones for geographical intelligence to impact agricultural decisions, or Matibabu in Kenya that's addressing malaria disease management by offering cost-effective, rapid early diagnosis of malaria. So very relevant in the African context. So deep tech is a catalyst for technology to bring progress across Africa. My second thought is on investment, and Africa's investment in deep tech is going to be a long game. It's something that we're going to have to be invested in, so to speak, for a very long time. Deep tech requires a lot of time and money to be invested in R&D, taking solutions from the lab to the market. In fact, some research suggests that for a biotech solution, you're likely looking at about 4 years and perhaps 1.2 million as a capital injection. And this is significantly higher if you're going to compare this to a software solution, which would likely take you under 1 year to take from idea to market. When it comes to investment and private investment at that, we're going to be looking for investors that are in it for the long haul. And so those investors that are looking for the next shiny thing, you know, with millions of social media users, you know, on their social media platforms. That's probably not the kind of investor that's going to thrive in deep tech in Africa. We're likely looking for an investor that is perhaps even emotionally invested in the process of deep tech from, you know, from the lab to the market. Investment other than from private investors is also obviously going to come from government in building homegrown solutions and in partnering with innovation hubs and academic institutions that really have been really good at surfacing innovators for deep tech and other spaces as well. But other than investing money, governments are also going to will also need to look at investing in the ecosystem. And so what is that robust IP framework that deep tech needs to be supported? How is government going to create an enabling environment for deep tech to thrive? So government in Africa is actually the biggest purchaser of technology in Africa. And so will be key to ensuring a user base for deep tech in Africa. Such a large chunk of the money coming from government really needs to begin going into deep tech if we connect this again to the fact that deep tech is really answering the questions that the AU's Agenda 2063 has been asking for a while. My third thought is, just like every other continent on the globe, Africa has issues to address. And for me, two key issues would be the innovation culture and the infrastructure. And on the innovation culture, we'll be looking at what does our ecosystem look like and where do we need it to be? And this really became a conversation during the COVID-19 pandemic right now, where within the African context, we began to witness African governments collaborating a lot more with private sector, and private sector and government collaborating a lot more with academia and with innovation hubs. Because as this global supply chain became disrupted because we could no longer travel or goods could no longer come in as fast as they used to, we now needed to begin looking inwards for what was available. Who could perform, or rather who could develop or produce PPEs faster at an affordable rates? How could we get goods and you know, groceries that people needed from point A to point B, considering perhaps even other crises that we're going through, like floods, you know, that we had in some parts of Kenya, for example, where I'm based. So these pieces of the puzzle need to begin talking to each other a lot more. And this is what I mean by innovation culture. Governments need to be looking at how to enable environment. So what's the tax climate now and how can they make that better? How can they improve ease of business? What can private organizations do around really pushing for long-term favorable policies and beginning to have concrete conversations around manufacturing in the space? What can local communities do to begin to get engaged in that innovation process? Because you're really not talking about innovating to scale if you're not collaborating with communities who at the end of the day are going to be the users and the market of a lot of these solutions that we're building in deep tech. On infrastructure, what comes to mind for me is the last mile. And in Africa, we cannot relent until we have communities connected to the internet across the continent without leaving anyone behind. Again, communities would be key to ensuring that whichever solutions that we are building really are able to scale and impact economy, and giving access to these local communities to the internet, again, catalyzes innovation. And then finally, obviously on infrastructure, we need a lot more high-end access, a lot more high-end accessible centers of excellence to allow for deep tech innovation to happen. My final thought is that Africa is opening up. And with our continental free trade area, this presents an amazing opportunity for innovators and for organizations, other organizations involved in deep tech to immediately begin talking about scale across the continent. When the borders come down or when the markets open up, you're really talking about new market for deep tech solutions. And imagine a deep tech startup being able right from the beginning, right from inception, to map that trajectory of growth, not just within its community or not just within its country, but across the continent, and be able to provide reliable data and a reliable plan to an investor. I think when you're talking to investors and you talk about scale and sustainability, and you have the map to prove it, and you can talk about the continental free trade area and what opportunity that presents, then investors, both local and international, begin to really pay attention. And so for me, this is an exciting opportunity to just ensure that not only are we talking about social good and deep tech within our communities, but we're talking about realistically, this is something that we're soon going to be able to scale across the continent and do so sustainably. So these are my 4 broad thoughts at this moment, and I'm really looking forward to a very robust engagement on this and other topics throughout this call.
Thank you so much, Nikesa. Thank you. That was really excellent. And, you really, I think, encapsulated how deep tech is made for Africa and Africa is made for deep tech in your points there. Moving now to Malik. So he's going to, I think, look a bit more at how deep tech can support development and economic growth and touch on some of the successful applications that there are there. Thank you, Malik.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. And I think, first of all, would like to thank Chatham House, Dame Rosalind Marsden, Ahmed Suleiman, Tegisti Amar, and Hannah Desta for helping to make this event a reality. Kind of touching on, Nikesa's excellent presentation there, I think, mentioning how, the kind of attraction for investment in Africa kind of requires investors to have a deep commitment to deep tech and taking research from the lab to inception in the market. I think kind of I'd like to take the opportunity kind of to talk to my personal story at this point, as I think it's also relevant to kind of view the situation from those who are invested in seeing Africa's development from a kind of sustainable development standpoint, but just kind of general progress overall for its people. So I think, it's an honor to have the opportunity to share with you thoughts and research around deep tech and then its potential to, aid the continent in meeting its sustainable development goals. I'll be speaking through the lens of the African Development Bank's High Fives, which is, where we've kind of positioned our research. Kind of talking to my personal background, I was fortunate enough in my capacity as founder of the Youth Factor to, connect with Chatham House, and that was focused on development of Sudanese youth through mentorship, education, and celebration of African cultural identity. And I think from forming, various grassroots institutions, that really took me into a thought process of how we could create opportunities for Africa's young demographic that formulated on both the micro and macro level. And I think, the inspiration piece that Riam mentioned earlier is critical. And for me, my personal inspiration was seeing my father, Malik Bedri, his dedication to African youth development, equal rights for young women, and various other initiatives that I think that inspiration piece can drive somewhat of an altruistic, ethical standpoint that will aid people in focusing on, giving back to Africa and ensuring the development that it has potentially. I think, the hope is Diaspora Ventures, which is, in early stages of its formation, is an African development-focused investment firm that specializes in deep tech startups. My partners, Carl McFadden and Mohammed Al-Samani, we founded this venture in the belief that, African development in our lifetime can be exponentially driven by frontier technology. And the piece around investment is what's required to create solutions that essentially are, very sustainable. And at the moment, we're in the process of raising capital for a fund and joint ventures. So, the focus being, the development portion is linked with the African Development Bank's High Fives, and we continue to collaborate with Conceptionx, which, as Riam mentioned, creates a deep tech pipeline for commercialization that could bring this closer to fruition, and certainly, open to collaboration with AfriLabs and other tech hubs. So, touching on, the African Development Bank's High Fives, the first of the 5 being lighting up and powering Africa. So 640 million Africans have no access to clean energy. So it's clear that on-grid and off-grid solutions are crucial for deeper energy penetration. The massive opportunity for renewable energy is highlighted by the fact that solar, lithium-ion batteries, and nuclear power all originated in academic research. Point two, feeding Africa. There are 1 in 4 people in Africa that are food insecure at the moment, which will be further impacted by the effects of climate change. Of course, the potential for agricultural production in Africa is huge, with 60% of the world's unused arable land. In our research, we've come across an organization called Plantix, which is an app that uses artificial intelligence to diagnose plant pests and diseases or nutrient deficiencies within the crops. Third point being industrialized Africa, where the full potential of African countries should be driven essentially by private sector-led investments. And we've seen examples of how blockchain, an organization called Datarella, specializes in applications in the fields of payments, disbursement, supply chain, and tracking, which could support logistics. And I think touching on technologies such as smartphones, which have driven seismic infrastructure advancements within these continents. The utility of smartphone type devices like iPhone, when it came out, prompted telcos to invest in supporting infrastructure due to the kind of rapid demand and value proposition that came from these technologies. Integrating Africa. So in 2019, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement was ratified, and it's the largest free trade area since the World Trade Organization. And on this basis, Africa is expected to have a combined business and consumer spending of $6.7 trillion. And we view that deep tech programs like Conception Africa have the potential to be a great integrator with African talent, with mentorship from the business community, as Rian mentioned earlier, as well as a network of African academic institutes. The vision being to create thought leadership that will allow potential group of African venture scientists and enable collaboration between them within their research and commercial enterprises that they set up. A great example of how integration of Africa can be accomplished is an organization called Swoop Aero, who rolled out multi-purpose, multi-fleet drone technology that was used to deliver essential healthcare products across Malawi. They took critical journey times down from 3 hours to 12 minutes. I recall introducing this idea at a meeting in the Sudanese embassy with various dignitaries, and I think the drone piece in particular really captured the imagination, and there's was introduced to me afterwards various applications on how drone technology can support agriculture, which is of course a big piece for Africa. And then in terms of improving quality of life of people in Africa, which is the 5th high five, we view that achievement of the first 4 high fives will of course have a considerable effect on the economy through better healthcare infrastructure, food security, and that deep technology can be a part of the catalyst in that. In regards to a couple of examples in medtech, there's an organization called Niramai who have introduced a low-cost, accurate, automated portable cancer screening tool in India. And then the Biofactory, which is an all-in-one sanitation to energy off-grid solution, which can be utilized in low-income, high-density areas in sub-Saharan Africa. I think moving on to kind of the investment landscape and how impact investing has grown as a whole. In 2018, the Global Impact Investing Network estimated that the industry had 500 billion of assets under management, which is double the figure from 2017. And although specific data on impact investment returns in Africa is, it's been hard to verify from our research. We found, a very good example of the proof of concept in India, an organization called Lock Capital, which in their annual report mentioned that 32 investments made 14 profitable exits in the past 14 years. From these investments, they've created nearly 40,000 jobs, improved the lives of 17,000 farmers, and have helped 400,000 plus people access healthcare. So I think, without, the time to dive into the emerging market comparatives, we see that as a really good example of what can be applied to Africa and what can be accomplished. And then, as a final point, we see it's critical that the diaspora has a massive part to play in supporting solutions for the continent. Remittances make a very large portion of GDP in a lot of these countries, and the impact of COVID will certainly, continue to impact the amount that diaspora members can, commonly share. So we think programs such as Conceptionx Africa, backed by the development organizations and investment funds to commercialize ventures, will help to drive growth and mitigate the effects of how this can create jobs and boost long-lasting economic prosperity and create ecosystemic growth. So, thank you all for your time, and thanks again to Chatham House and my fellow panelists.
Thank you very much, Malik, and thank you to all our speakers. We'll move into the question and answer session, and I'll remind everybody participating and those who may have joined a bit later to, if you could please use the raise hand function at the bottom of Zoom there in order to ask a question live, and we'll prioritize taking questions live, and if selected, we'll grant you the ability to unmute yourself to ask that question. We also have the Q&A box as well throughout the meeting, and so we'll be taking some questions through the Q&A, but please, in the first instance, do use the raise hand function to ask your question directly. Reminding everyone that this meeting is on the record as well, so the information is being used from the meeting, and you can identify speakers and any other participants. So we've got a number of questions come up, and I'll take groups of maybe 2 or 3 for our speakers. First question will be from Barney. Please, Barney, do introduce yourself. Barney Walsh.
Hi, my name is Barney Walsh. I'm from the African Leadership Centre, King's College London. I had a question about, very interesting talks from all of you, by the way. There was discussion about obviously the role of the private sector and also about the role of government and encouraging investment and things. But I'm interested in fact, some of these deep technologies or really transformative technologies actually can create challenges for governments and actually, challenge traditional, in inverted commas, governance processes in Africa. The internet is the obvious example. Yes, social media, pressure on governments and that kind of thing. But other, artificial intelligence, Bitcoin, challenging traditional banking structures and that kind of thing. Have either of you encountered problems with governments or resistance from particular governments in Africa to some of these, the possibilities of some of these interesting technologies? I hope that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Barney. I'll take a couple more questions. One from Emmanuel Ohanwe. Please, Emmanuel, if you could unmute yourself and ask your question. Emmanuel, are you there? Are you able to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, I'm there. Yeah, good afternoon or good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, Emmanuel, please do introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Emmanuel, the founder of agrinotech.co. So in agrinotech, we are helping farmers address their low-tech purchasing power, and at the same time, we want to help people claim their own share from the trillion-dollar agricultural sector. So one of the problems we have is that farmers have low-tech purchasing power, and we've tried to iterate and figure out how to solve this problem. And the 2 things come to mind. We either subsidize technology to enable these farmers, purchase this tech, or we increase their earning capacity. So I don't know, is there any possibility around subsidizing technology for farmers to enable them leverage tech in farm? That's my question.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And I'll take one last question from Katrin Pipe. Katrin, please do introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, well, thank you for this event and for the opportunity also to ask questions. I wrote my question already in the Q&A. I'm an anthropologist working at the University of Leuven in Belgium, carrying out research on technology and society in Central Africa. And I was fascinated by Nekesa Were's observation that now during COVID times, Corona times, because of the disruption of imports of goods, certain African governments have been able to set up collaborations with the private sector and with academia, as you said. And I would like to ask you to give some more examples, examples about that, because usually when we think about technology, technological investment in technology and African states, in my experience for the DRC, Congo, for example, usually the stories are about failure, about unfulfilled promises. So I'm curious to hear some success stories.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Katrin. Okay, so in terms of the first question we had, looking from Barney at challenges to traditional governments. Riam, would you like to take that question?
I suppose I can take that question more generally, and I suppose Barney was also referring specifically to African governments, so then perhaps someone else from the panel can cover that specifically. From my perspective, it's technology. It's a two-edged sword. It can be used for bad and for good, and I think the key thing here is to have the right individuals and institutions involved to commercialize this, and by bringing players like government, like the public sector involved, charitable foundations, and also venture capitalists. Normally, when these technologies are developed, the players can be quite narrow. Traditionally, we've seen, industry working with universities to produce certain technologies that can be deployed in a number of ways. But I think what we're talking about here is a more democratized platform where individuals like our not-for-profit institution, the African Development Bank, other accelerators across Africa can work with governments to ensure that these technologies are used in a way that can be to everyone's benefit. And I think Malik and Nekesa can pick up on specific examples relating to African governments on that.
Nekesa, Malik, would either of you like to come in? Thank you, Nekesa.
Yes. I think the gentleman's question was around some of the traditional ways of government working and how that presents a challenge now. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, is that it's not business usual anymore, and we need to get out of our comfort zones, and really the next few months to perhaps 1 year will revolve around government, citizens just working to survive. Governments across Africa have, I think to some extent, acknowledged the fact that they are definitely going to need to work with other stakeholders. I know that usually governments will be the people that will present policies that tend to stifle innovation, but in this case, I feel that there may be an opportunity to actually set a new trend. There definitely is an opportunity to reset, and more progressive governments across Africa we find that are taking this opportunity. For example, we may find that usually data is something that governments traditionally want to hold on to, because data is really the source that you need if you're going to build solutions at scale. We find that slowly now governments are beginning to have conversations with other stakeholders, with innovators around what can you do with this data that allows you to develop a solution that will work for this community, that will work for this location, stuff around contact tracing, for example. So COVID-19 really presents a great opportunity for us to disrupt the way that government works and for us to really set up the innovation culture.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I think Malik, perhaps we can tackle one of the other questions. Would you have any thoughts on really, I guess it's in part linked, you know, this question around subsidizing technology, particularly in the agricultural industry, and helping to support development of farming. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's an excellent question, and as you mentioned, it really does tie into the first question around how can we ensure government support, you know, when it comes to technologies that are somewhat potentially sit uncomfortably with, you know, established structures that already exist. And I think this is where, you know, organizations that will serve as hubs between, you know, academia, government, policy and investment are going to be critical for really driving development in this area. I think the point around subsidies is critical, and I think governments will need to, you know, witness the impact of how, you know, technology can be linked to various areas to drive, you know, sustainable returns and, you know, growth in the economy. So I think it's essential that, you know, the research institutions are collaborating and preparing, you know, really extensive amounts of documentation that can be used as a proof of concept in the area for these government bodies. And certainly I think, you know, the intention from Diaspora Ventures and other organizations that seek investment for deep technology is to really, you know, find solutions that are scalable, potentially low cost, and can be, you know, rolled out to across the demographic, and allow those individuals and entrepreneurs to help the market grow essentially by, you know, increasing in output or driving efficiency.
Thank you. We have that third question as well, very good question, really looking at examples of collaboration between particular African governments and private sector or academia during these last few months, during COVID time. Nekesa, would you perhaps like to come in and talk a bit about that, and anyone else if you have anything to add?
Yeah, so a couple of things that the government in Kenya, where I'm based, has worked to support efforts. One was with setup of a committee of people that were really well known within the innovation space and well admired and respected, that is focused on really surfacing innovations that government can begin to use. And so what's great about this is that it's people that you either know or that are one step removed from you as a person in the innovation space. And so if you have solutions that you think government could benefit and help to scale to fight the pandemic, then it really begins to open up opportunities and open up the door and that pipeline that allows for innovators to begin to interact with government simply by getting people that government knows and trusts, and also that the innovation community knows and trusts. So I'm really curious and hopeful around how setting up this committee works. Second, I think she asked for some kind of case study. So we have a university, it's called Kenyatta University, based in Kenya. And there were some students there who developed a very low cost ventilator. So the rest of the ecosystem really rallied around it. And they even got this to the point where our president mentioned it as one of the possible options or solutions that really help us to find the pandemic, and gave, you know, some form of reassurance of support coming from government. We also had private stakeholders. We had lawyers come in and say, you know, we're going to help talk you through, you know, what does it look like around your IP and so on. We had people in the manufacturing space talking about, this is how we are going to come in to help you scale this and ensure that we can reach as many hospitals as possible. So that's just one example of how it is possible to actually galvanize an innovation community, or rather an ecosystem, to just really enforce a positive innovation culture.
Thank you so much. Riam, do you have any, would you like to follow up on that at all?
No, I think Nekesa covered it perfectly. Nothing to add.
In that case, I'll take another round of questions, knowing that we're moving into time here. So the next question, if Salma Abbasi would like to ask, I'll allow you to speak. Please do unmute yourself, Salma.
Oh, yep. Sorry, I've just done that. Thank you very much. Excellent ideas and presentations. I think definitely would like to collaborate with you, but we're working in Africa and Asia, and I think the cross-pollination of innovation and ideas is excellent. One of the questions that I saw in the chat box was about how do we get private sector, universities, and industry to collaborate, and I think COVID-19 presents an excellent opportunity. We are currently doing that in Asia through a series of webinars, and we're bringing in young people like yourself to talk about different things that they're doing as innovative solutions, leveraging technology because it's been the bridge that we have today, but also having countries like the Republic of Korea and Bangladesh present the solutions that they have done to actually operationalize the response. So the ideas are coming from very interesting places, and what we're finding is the best ideas are actually not coming from the developed world or the so-called advanced economies. They are actually coming from creative young people that are, or governments that are grappling with limited resources. So I think we have to find a way in the collaboration framework that you build, and Chatham House is a perfect platform to really ensure that there's a common, very clear, focused goal, and then put the innovation around it. Because if it's very broad level, it's difficult to do. That's my recommendation to the question. But the key is multi-sector stakeholders that engage. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to take a couple more interventions and questions. Mabrak Gebrawaldi, if you'd like to introduce yourself and ask a question.
Hi, I'm Mabrak. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mabrak, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I am Mabrak Gebrawaldi. I am based in the UK, but I work in Eritrea and I know Ethiopia very well. I think what I want to say is being part of the process of how Eritrea is, containing the COVID, I think needs to be shared with other African countries. And why they are containing it successfully is because of the communities. The structure of the communities is so well mobilized. They've used the community structure, poets, artists, educators, and singers to really pass the message for people in everywhere. The Women's Association, the Youth Association, the Workers Association, they've all come together to fight the COVID-19. And that is the structure that helped Eritrea to win the war. And in the crisis time, they've used that straight away. So I think,
Mabrak, do you perhaps have a question linked to that and deep technology?
I think the deep technology, I'm coming to it, while we really have to work with the communities. Technology is good, but also technology has to apply with our culture and traditions as well. So I think the development has to go side by side. I think technology, we need it. It's very important, but also it should not erode our culture and our traditions. What we see, in a lot of young people using technology, having the press is good as well, but when you have too many presses, press release, and the community is not developed side by side, in fact, it can play, counter results rather than supporting communities. Another thing that I want.
Thank you. So we'll take one more question on this end, and I'll go with Joseph Ogbonna. Please introduce yourself and ask a question. Joseph, if you're able to, please, yeah.
I have unmuted myself. Thank you. Thank you for excellent presentations. Thank you for this opportunity from Chatham House. So my question, I'm based in London. I'm a leadership coach in London, and I focus on mindsets. My question is, what can be done to support the confidence of African youth who will be involved in deep tech?
Joseph, I don't know if that's intentional, but your sound has completely gone there. So I don't know if you could repeat the question, turn the volume up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Joseph, and Joseph Ogbonna, and I'm a leadership coach based in London. I focus on mindsets as the key to performance and anything else you do. And my question is, what can be done to support the confidence of African youth who will be involved in deep tech to somewhat feel okay about selfishly prioritizing the African perspective in coming up with solutions? Is that clear, my question, please?
That was much clearer. Thank you very much, Joseph, for that.
Ahmed, I'm happy to take a couple of them because I think they were related to what we're doing.
Please go ahead, Rhiam.
Okay, so so first is Salma Abbasi's comment. I really agree to what you said, and I'm just going to add on to that a lot of what we, a lot of the problems can be, a lot of the problems in the world can be solved by solving informational asymmetry. So, people know, students have specific skills, their mentors have other skills, industry has problems. So sometimes there's just bringing these people together so that they can share what they require and what they can solve can be solved by a platform like ours. To give you a specific example, you're talking about cross-sectoral multi-party collaborations. In Conceptionx, we involve industry players quite early, where they put forward to our students problems that they need solved. And then the students can use the research skills to actually address those and collaborate with other institutions as well. And thereby, by working together, they can make that happen. So I commend what you said. The second question was about culture and traditions. I think what we're saying here is to have students from Africa doing PhDs and studying in Africa to actually develop technologies that are relevant to what they're doing. So hopefully that will be a much more integrative approach than having someone from another country build a solution and try to shoehorn it into an African economy or landscape, and conflicts arising as a result. And the last question about confidence, I think people need role models, people need examples of people who have done it before, students who are either based in Africa or from an African origin solving problems. I'm not really sure what the selfishly question refers to, but if someone is developing a new solution to kind of improve agriculture across the world, I would commend that. And so is a platform for solving Alzheimer's disease by testing drugs. So I think people just need to see more examples of people who look like them, who are raising capital, who come from similar backgrounds, so that we can start trumping the idea of venture capitalism having a specific shape and form and investment patterns. Those are my contributions to the questions.
Thank you very much. Malik, would you like to come in at all?
Certainly.
This question of how do you capture culture and keep tradition, I think is one that you might want to talk about.
I think, Rhiam certainly kind of touched on the point in terms of, our aim is to collaborate with Conceptionx and in launching a Conceptionx Africa through, having African individuals, studying and developing research is linked to some of the challenges that Africa faces in terms of its development using deep technology. One of the areas, we're looking at and we're kind of collaborating with organizations is to raise a scholarship fund that will, facilitate that opportunity for those African students. And I think, the cultural standpoint, I think, is very much linked to opportunities that are open to the diaspora of each of these African nations, and that, there's that linguistic and cultural understanding. So, Africans studying in the diaspora and, some of the top academic institutions, as Rhiam has mentioned, have that opportunity to potentially, and linking this back to the last question, create companies that, in operating in Africa could, potentially create lots of jobs. And I think, I'll link that to Swoop Aero as an example, who launched in Malawi the network of drone technology for the purpose of transporting medical supplies. But essentially they, worked with the Malawian government to really train up the local workforce to ensure that this network was operated and managed by, upskilling that local population. So to this day, there's several, trained Malawian staff members. I think, these kind of examples are, should be used as I mentioned earlier, case studies to prove out the concept, and that, expanding it further and seeking investment and showing that, any original research ideas can be commercialized, and, kind of very creative methods such as Conceptionx to bring that to market are essential. So
thank you very much, Malik. Thank you. I think we have time maybe just to take a couple more questions. So I'm going to allow Jesu Teleminhen Akamo to talk. Apologies if I got your name wrong there, and please do introduce yourself and unmute.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
All right, thank you very much. I'm following the trend. I'm Timmy. Sorry, I'm a Timmy. You can call me Timmy. I'm a MSc student of OAU here in Nigeria. And so, following the trend of the discussion, a major point came to mind because of my MSc thesis is along this line, and one of the findings was that there's a recognizable level of paranoia by African governments towards supporting technology, especially in relation to youth. And the traditional mode of government in which the government seeks to control everything has been transported into the tech space. And as a result of that, it affects the political will of the government to implement policies related to deep tech, and also the level of confidence of African youths in relating with government. And so my question is, I have two questions. What lessons can Africa learn from Europe with regards to this? And what can be done to address these repressive traits and get government to face the realities of this century? But based on the responses to the questions so far, I think the second question has been addressed. So you could focus on the first question: lessons Africa can learn from Europe in relation to deep tech, between in terms of relationship between youth.
That's an excellent question. Thank you very much. I'll take one final question, and that's from Ravimbo Muzwizwa. If you would like to ask your question and introduce yourself, and then that will have to be all.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your really great and very important discussions that we've had here. Thank you to Chatham House. My name is Ravimbo. I'm an epidemiologist based in London, but I'm originally from Zimbabwe. My question is around impact. And so it's basically, with the impact investment focusing in deep technology, you usually need a foundational, from what you've said, foundational levels of infrastructure and government buy-in and collaboration. So in this space, is there a risk of creating silos or technology silos within the continent, which would widen inequalities between the different countries? And how are impact investors focusing or weighing the limitations of different countries to allow for continent-wide progress? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are excellent questions. Nkeza, would you be able to maybe come in on that last question? I think that was a, perhaps you might be able to give us some thoughts on that.
I think it's important to acknowledge that there will be, the way that ecosystems work, it's likely that you'll have an ecosystem within an ecosystem and within an ecosystem. And if you look at if you perhaps for a moment look at the concept of shared value, which is that people within a community, different stakeholders within a community will look at the community and what the needs are there and figure out how what their individual strengths plug into making sure that the needs of those community are met, then you'll find that by default, you tend to attract different personas, different players into addressing societal issues. And to that extent, I don't think that it would be siloing, because if, for example, we say that that what we need to fix within our community is that everyone needs to have clean water, then what that would mean for any corporates that are involved or do share the concept of shared value is that they would basically figure out how does our mode of operations allow us to address the issue of clean water while still being profitable. any hubs or academia within the region would then be figuring out how do we motivate or give incentive to our innovators to invest some time in addressing the issue of clean water, and to do the same with government. And so to that extent, I think that it wouldn't be siloing, but rather it would be developing solutions specific for that community, which can then be iterated to meet the needs of other communities facing a similar challenge.
Thank you. Would either of our other panelists like to come in on that question before we turn to the final one? No. So the last question would be around government control in the tech space, which has kind of, I think, been talked about a bit already, but specifically what lessons can be drawn from Europe with regards to implementation of governance and perhaps partnership as well, more broadly.
I can take a little bit of that, and I think when we say, lessons from Europe or from the UK, everything, things are progressing here as well. So it's by no means a perfect picture in the UK either, specifically as it comes to, commercialization of university intellectual property. I think, at least we've seen in the last 10 years, this improving. And all parties have to work together. And I think, there's no straightforward answer to that. I mean, when I was doing my PhD 10 years ago, even working with industry was, not encouraged in the academic space in some areas, especially in the hard sciences. But now we see kind of universities changing and moving towards more of an impact piece. And now, entrepreneurship is even encouraged. Universities are slowly changing their intellectual property policy to start kind of to enable these innovations to go forward without being locked in an IP battle. Governments as well are releasing lots of funding programs and grants that are a bit more open-ended and to allow people to be more creative, things that are not close-ended problems, so that we can let really smart people excel and go forward. So if I can condense this with two learnings that we've had, the first is loosen up intellectual property policy, especially as it relates to students in universities. And we can have some great examples from places like University College London, where the IP is very much in favor of the students. And, for government, have more, funding programs that look a bit more like investments, that are a bit more open-ended, that encourage people to solve problems rather than have very strict priority areas. But these are my opinions.
Thank you very much, Raman. Any final comment from you, Malik?
I think adding to that, kind of the connection between academic institutions in Europe and Africa is kind of a critical piece, and programs that build in the mentorship element will kind of certainly, allow for, African stakeholders to really, get a sense of where regulation and policy needs to evolve in order to capitalize on the use of deep technology in itself. And I think, one of the key areas that will attract investors is, solutions around fintech and regtech that come out of Africa that will build transparency and trust within the climate to really, encourage government bodies as well as policymakers to support that foreign investment piece and bring collaboration closer to fruition.
Thank you, Malik. It falls upon me just to thank you all of our speakers for an excellent job, and I very much hope you learned a lot. I did, and you enjoyed the event, and also to our participants joining us on the various platforms. Thank you very much for joining us for what's been a really interesting discussion, and I hope we can take this forward with further discussions around this area in future. Virtual thanks, many thanks to you all.